All right, we have with us Jay Thakkar from India, who's the host of the Jay Thakkar Show, a podcast that is available. Jay, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. We were talking a little bit beforehand about what your show's about and how it's an interesting combination, sort of intersection of entrepreneurship and self-help. And I thought, that's a nuanced way of doing it. I like that. So before we get into your show and a little bit of a theme that you and I thought we'd talk about, we started this project of, COVID-19 started, a lot of us went into lockdown about a year ago because these will be released in March. And that was a period of, great upheaval, social, emotional, and otherwise. And when it happened to me, when everything closed down, I was thinking very locally, like right here. And but I saw videos of places around the world, and you're in India. So it would be great to sort of hear what things happened in your state of Gujarat.
Gujarat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Again, my Anglicanization of words. Can you say that? Sorry, one more time. I want to get that right.
Gujarat.
Gujarat.
Yeah.
Okay. So, tell us a little bit about what happened there for COVID-19.
When COVID-19 was new, it entered India around month of January. In initial couple of months, only 100 cases were registered. So the government of India were taking precautionary steps at present because they were mainly focusing on the PPE kits and masks and sanitizers. And when it started growing exponentially, then on March 24th, the nationwide lockdown was announced. And that was the biggest lockdown in terms of population. Uh, because even after lockdown, the numbers were raising because COVID as being the rate of spreading COVID was not stopping or it was not reducing. So that's why lockdown helped us in reducing it to go down to tier 3, tier 4 cities. Uh, COVID was majorly held in tier 1, tier 2 cities because of lockdown. And because of that, the benefit happened in if we talk about economics of the country. The obviously COVID has affected everyone in terms of economics, but if we tell about the market consumption, India was first importing PPE kits from other countries. Within few months of lockdown, India was self-sufficient in terms of production of PPE kits, and India was exporting PPE kits to country. Not only PPE kits, masks and sanitizers as well. India was first considered as lacking in terms of ventilators. After that, we produced uh, made in India ventilators, and we also started exporting it to our neighboring countries. So it was sort of a necessary slap, I would say, to for our own
Right.
for our own people, so that we can understand the amount of potential we carry as a country. Because not every country can sustain on other country for lifetime, and especially during such pandemics. So I think this was one of the most revolutionary change which COVID has brought in terms of if we talk in India's perspective.
Wow. So it sounds like this pandemic happens March 24th, country goes into lockdown. India, is it the second most populated?
Second most populated country.
Right. There's like something like 1 billion people that live there.
1.3 billion people.
So 1.3 billion people live in India. Country goes into lockdown. They're having to import masks. And then there's this kind of economic sort of, whoa, wake up call. Why don't we make it? And there's this mass sort of, dare I say, industrialization, production.
Mass
of PPE.
production,
Mass production, thank you. And India's economy is like, whoa, wait a second. We can be like self-sufficient here and not have to rely on all the countries, because as we know, relying on, PPE, like in the United States and Canada, that was like a crisis.
Yeah, because even it's not even fair for other countries as well. Like for example, if India was reliant on Canada for PPE kits, it wasn't even fair for Canada because Canada required PPE kit for its own citizens.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't even fair for the other country to be able to provide something to different country because they also need that in similar amounts.
Right. Yeah. They need it for
Yeah,
themselves. Yeah.
yeah.
So if
So
India is
that,
producing these kits and then giving it to other countries, well, what about the 1.3 billion people that live there? So that's when India was like, okay, we got to
yeah,
take care of ourselves. It's the old, when you go on an airplane, they're like, you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you put on somebody else's, or you'll pass
true,
out and you can't help anybody. And
true,
India very
100%.
much lived that example.
And that's the only reason why India has provided COVID vaccine to 12 different countries
Oh,
right now.
right.
Because COVID vaccine was never supposed to be able, that Indian COVID vaccine would be so successful. Right now, Indian COVID vaccine is one of the most successful vaccine against all strains of COVID-19. And
Wow.
that's why India has given vaccines to 12 different countries and has been reported that few more countries are there in the list who will be getting India's COVID vaccine.
So India is, I mean, through this pandemic, and we've seen a lot of this, is there's this um, element of adaptability and
True.
resiliency, not even just in nations, but in ourselves. And when we're hit with this, calamity of sorts of a pandemic, we see that countries such as India, not only have they now adapted, not only are they surviving, but now they're thriving on a global economic scale. So they're kind of like
100%.
on top right now. Is that sort of what's happening?
And in terms of providing COVID vaccines, yes, India
Wow.
is on top.
Because I thought my understanding was that Germany was the other big producer of the vaccine.
Yeah, Germany is not very much close to India, but yes, it is among top few nations in terms of vaccine production.
Yeah. But the reason why India is able to produce so much is because the number of people that they can kind of allocate into the production of something.
100%. If
Right.
I one of my relative has his own factory which was producing PPE kits. So when I talked to him, he said that before pandemic happened, when government was when government has began its initials in terms of producing PPE kit in India, there was 12 hours a day the factory was running before lockdown. After lockdown, factory was running 24 by 7.
Whoa.
The owner was like, from where will I get
Yeah.
material? What government did is government gave material to the factory. Government just asked that you need to take this material, make PPE kit, the transportation and the raw material, everything will be taken care of by the government.
Wow.
The only work of the factory was to convert raw material into the product. Product will be taken care of by the government, where the product will go, where it will be used. Everything is government's headache. The only thing factory needs to do is just produce.
So another thing that we've seen is during this pandemic is while lots of industries have been, gravely impacted by this, hospitality, tourism, XYZ, but other places have made hand over fist, right? Like a friend of mine,
True.
he works at a like a hand sanitization sort of, they sell hand sanitizer, and he's like,
Yeah.
dude, I have never made so much money in my life. I'm like, well, that's great. I mean, I'm living on the CERB, but but
True.
there's this element of some people are like really sort of being financially hit hard, and others are like, you know, they wish they could
Financially
stop working.
booming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is, I mean, I wonder what the consequences, not necessarily positive or negative, but just again, what the adaptations to this will be after this pandemic. I mean,
I think the adaptation will be, we all know that because of pandemic, the health sector has grown exponentially, not
yes,
only in India, but in every country,
yeah,
right?
has to.
So what now, see, like, for example, if I'm the government and I have to look down at our five major topics, one of them is health sector. Because of pandemic, health sector have become so much uh, developed that if health sector will be given 20% less strength, and that 20% will be divided in other four, then the other four will be able to grow faster and health sector will still be there at the top. It's like
Right,
now
right.
we have
Yeah.
we have a pillar which is done, which is strong. Now we can focus our energy in making different pillars strong.
Well, a friend of mine was saying that um, there was never any money being invested in COVID vaccines, because COVID essentially is like it's called novel coronavirus because coronavirus is
Yeah,
like a cold, but nobody was ever injecting money into that. Then all of a sudden a pandemic comes, and globally the world is like, we have got to figure this out. So people were already trying to understand this thing, but now suddenly there was money being like again thrown at them, that they were able to expedite these things, right? It's sort of like um, in the 1960s, the space race. Well, the United States of America didn't really care about going into space until they found out that Russia had launched like a dog or a monkey or something like that into
yeah.
space. They're like, holy shit, we got to get on this, man. So pandemic happens and they're like, we have got to figure this out.
True, 100%. It's always like, if you cannot learn from others' mistake, you have to learn by making mistakes.
Yes.
And because we didn't learn, like, once when cases were reported in China, not
Mm,
every country got to know that this can spread to our country. So if no one knew from China's mistake, we have to suffer the mistake.
right. Well, and I really do think that at least from a Western, from where I live very comfortably. We live very comfortably here in the West, and this really kind of woke us up from our slumber. I mean, people were fighting
Yeah,
each other for toilet paper, which is ridiculous. But anyways, we just saw that this this sort of luxury that we live in is fragile.
true, 100%.
Yeah.
We all were concerned about the country's economy, but then we also forgot about our economical status, which we used to believe in past. We used to believe that if I have $1 million in my hand, I'm something.
Mm,
I'm a rich person.
right.
But now when you see same $1 million in your hand, but you see someone else suffering with COVID, you feel that person's life is more important than this $1 million.
Right.
And that's what I think this COVID has helped us in gaining. And in my personal terms as well, because I completed my high school just before COVID entered in India, and there was vacation time when this COVID happened. So I was like, now what will I do? Because being in high school, I was shit. I was just focusing on my books.
Yeah.
What I should get marks, books, marks,
Yeah.
nothing else. I was,
Not live.
and after that, when I thought that let me start going in content creation, and you
Mm,
won't imagine, Spotify India, just after lockdown, Spotify India got 1,000% raise in terms of listeners
right.
just after lockdown.
Right.
So imagine the amount of content consumption. And there also we came to know that books are not 100%, books are not the only source of knowledge. We
Yes.
all went to podcasts for learning. We all went to TED Talks for learning. We all went to different other sources for learning. And that's what made us realize that books will help us in getting a platform.
Mm,
books will not help us in setting up our whole lives.
Mm. Hmm.
Books, marks will give us a platform that, hey, you have this good platform, now you can jump from here. But that doesn't mean that the existence of this platform is as equal to the existence of yourself in society. If you don't have this platform, you need to work a little harder, but eventually you will even go there. It's just that you get good platform with good marks. Good. If you don't get, work harder, you will eventually get it. And the source of knowledge is also not always books. I mean, books in terms of
That's
academics.
just
I'm
one.
talking.
That's just one input are books, but there's a
Yeah,
myriad of ways, sources of getting knowledge. So
100%.
is that kind of what happened for you, Jay? Is we go into lockdown, and because my understanding is this has happened for a lot of people, and there's this space of time in terms of self-reflection, and you're like, okay, hold on. So I've
100%.
dedicated my life to books and getting good marks, but what am I actually doing with myself? I mean, to be alive is a privilege.
You know what happened in me was like I was always given the opportunity to select my own career.
Mm,
When I was small, every student, I was like, I want to go to space. I want to become astronaut.
right.
Then from there, I want to become pilot. At least I can fly beyond clouds.
Yeah.
And then, my interest started. Uh, my interest started going into physics. I was fascinated by physics.
Mm,
So I from my sixth grade, uh, as I got the access of Facebook there with my father's guidance. So I used to go and join all the physics related groups there. So eventually I got in touch with a research organization which is based in India. We started doing a project. We grew that project. At that time I was in ninth grade when this project started. Then we grew that. Now that project is, I mean, we are trying to get it funded by the government of India to be able to help in defense. And from there, and when I went to my high school, I was like, okay, good. So now I need to go for physics. I need to do this. I need to do that. I was so invested in physics. After that, when this lockdown happened, I was like, okay, now what to do? I
right.
mean, whatever I need to learn, I was learning from books. But now, as my high school has got over, I have knowledge of those books. So those books are not that meaningful for me right now.
Mm,
But still, there's time for university to open. Now, what will I do in that time? Plus, COVID has ensured that university will open little later.
right.
What will I do in that time? I was so fascinated. And then I thought that, okay, let me start creating content.
Yeah.
I started creating content on YouTube. After 2 or 3 videos, done. My brain was like, now I cannot create more content, bro, please. And then because I was so lazy, I thought that, okay, now what's the other way of creating content? To bring guests on the show. Now, I didn't thought in terms of creating a podcast. I was like, I bring guests on the show, I'll ask them question, and they will give me the content. I
Right.
don't have to create content from my side. Guest is the only content creator for me, and I'll have the right to publish that.
Right.
So in that lazy mindset, I started podcast, and
You're
from
just working
there,
harder, or excuse me, you're working
yeah,
smarter, not harder.
and then I came to realize that, okay, this is not an easy game, which as I thought, because to
Mm,
be able to convince someone to come on your show, to be able to convince them that your words will matter to my audience, that's one of the most important thing, to convince a person. So that helped me.
point.
By now I have got around 3,000 rejections from different guests. 3,000 rejections.
Right.
And after those 3,000 rejections, I have 26 to 27 episodes by now.
Yes.
So that rejection, more than podcasts, those rejection helped me to understand myself. Like, how am I communicating?
Yeah.
How influential am I? how can I get this person to know about me? Because every person whom I was contacting, obviously they need certain numbers. No
Yeah.
one will come on you. No one will come to you and will say, "Hey, bro, you are doing good. I'll come to you." Okay, you
Yeah.
are doing good. Content is good. That is a different part. But everybody needs a number
Have you ever
because
heard of a catch 22? A catch 22?
no,
It's like, okay, so I need a job, but in order to get a job, I need job experience. Well, how do I get job experience?
true,
Right? That's a catch
100%.
22. So it's like, I need guests, but my guests need me to have listeners. How do I get listeners? Well, I need guests.
True,
It's like,
true,
okay, what do I
100%.
do? Now, on your rejection, you said you were rejected, 3,000 times. Which one hurt more, the first one or the 3,000, the 3,000th one?
Initial 10,
Exactly.
first 10.
Yeah.
Because when there's a Bollywood, I won't say a Bollywood and Gujarati film industry actor. He
Mm.
was very famous actor. He was having good amount of followers back then. So normally DM'd him that, "Hey sir, I'm a big fan of yours. I'm starting a podcast. Will you come? Will you come as a guest?" He was very informal. He was like, "Yes, I'll come." I was like, "Damn, this kind of personality is coming."
Yeah.
I had him. I was a shit. What he only handled the positives of podcast. I was the one who I was highlighting the negatives. Like, I mean, in terms of communication, I didn't knew how to speak at that time.
Mm. Mm.
So after that, I was like, if this kind of personality can give a yes to me, then everyone can give a yes. I
Right.
was so confident, and I started messaging each and everyone. And from there, people used to see, they used to accept my DM, but they won't reply. So I would get a scene here, and that would feel more hurt. That would hurt me
Right.
more.
Right. Right. They'd
Because
see it and
if you
just
have
forget it.
seen this, at least you
Yeah.
can tell yes or no.
Yeah.
And on Instagram, they need to accept first.
Mm.
Then only I can, as a sender, can see that have you seen or not.
Right.
And that would hurt more, that okay, you have seen it, you have accepted my DM request, and
Yeah.
still you are not replying.
Well, what's kind of cool about that is now that you know that experience, as you grow and grow, I mean, it does take time, of course. I mean, I'm not, I'm not anywhere where I'd like to be. Like I said, it takes time.
Yeah,
But when people start messaging you, you're going to have that sort of insight. Like, I remember when I was this person, and I'm going to, at the very least, I'm going to say, hey, man, keep it up. Thank you for the message. I'm a little busy right now. Because I've gotten that message back too. And it's like, that's great. But when people like don't even respond back, you're like, all right.
I'll tell you one interesting story. There's a person whom I'm approaching from past 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
First, when I approached him, he said that I'm not doing any podcast right now. 1 week later, I saw him I saw him on a very big podcast in India.
Mm.
That hurt. That one hurt really more. But I was like, okay, I want to bring him, so I'll ignore it. After a month, I again approached him. He was like, "Hey, bro, no, sorry." Now, when I approached him, he was like, "Hey, I need to skip it." Very next day, he was on a podcast.
Right.
And that just really fascinates me, that okay, if you really are not interested to come on someone's show, you can directly tell them that, "Hey bro, I'm not
Yes.
interested," rather than just telling lies that I need to skip it, I'm busy, or I'm not interested in doing any podcast.
That's a great
because
point. Yeah.
because I knew that when I got an emergency and I was unable to reply you back, when you mailed me that, "Hey, I'm planning to do in XYZ days, and at which day would be preferable to you," and I got the mail. I was looking at my schedule, that which day would fit perfect, and then some urgently I got a work, so I need to go. And then when I came back, I saw your mail that, "Have you received the mail or not?" I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was unable to reply you."
I can be
But
persistent. That's actually my
Yeah,
friend
and
Jesse. He
that's
could be persistent. Yeah. We both can.
that's one of the most important quality podcast guests should have. I
Mm,
got I was messaging a person from past 2 months, and after that I was able to get him on my show. And when I got him, my viewership went crazy
yeah.
from 2030 to 500, 600.
Wow. That's awesome.
And and yeah, and when I said that, what's your opinion on this show, means how it went, I was taking
Mm,
his review, and he was like, hey man, whatever you do, I know you are going to improve, but one thing you keep with you is this persistent, being
yes.
persistent,
Yes.
because that's the most important quality. And even as not even as podcast host, but even as any person on any work,
Yeah.
if you're persistent, you are naturally growing.
There's so many wonderful, like, there's not just one sort of golden virtue to be in life, but one thing that I'm learning is the importance of honesty and persistence. I mean,
100%.
like, I've tiptoed around people a lot in my life, and people, as they hear my show, they know I'm kind of like, you know, I try to be safe or whatever. Like, I like to be unguarded when I speak to people, but there is there's something to be said about honesty. And when I show somebody something, it's like, hey man, can you tell me what you honestly think of this? Versus like, hey, it's like, oh, this is great. Like, well, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear your honest feedback, because that's how you get
100%.
better, right? That's all part of persistence. We have to sort of, we could be very emotional creatures, like, oh, my feelings hurt. But sometimes we
True.
have to sort of separate our feelings from our work, because my work is not who I am as a person. I will always have the same value. You will always have the same value as me. That's part
100%.
of being a human. But the work that I create, I can always make that better, and how I make it better is by
100%.
your feedback. So,
100%. and
and
and and one more thing, when I was recently watching one of my friends review on a video where he said that even in terms of starting a conversation, like many people feel shy to start a conversation, or to be in a public space. What he said is, if you be honest, 90% of your nervousness will vanish. Like if I'm talking to
yeah,
you, and if I say that, hey, I'm please excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous right now, that statement itself
yeah.
will reduce 90% of my nervousness. And that will also give you a context that this guy is nervous, so it will help you to know that, okay, this guy is nervous, I need to make him a little more comfortable.
You know what? Like, and this is a hasty generalization, of course, but all throughout history, there's been influences of, there's Western influences and there's Eastern influences. And I wrote an article on the difference between competition and cooperation, or individualism or individualistic sort of cultures and societies, and collectivist societies. And in the West, I struggled with it, but it's this idea of, I want to be the best, individualism, versus
True.
cooperation, where it's like, let's be the best. Like, dude, let's get each other better. When you win, I win. When I win, you win. And that
True.
mindset, which is kind of influenced by Buddhist teachings and Eastern thought, when
Hmm.
you are able to kind of harness both of those together, that again is when you can create and access your potential, because you're not trying to hoard it. Like, I just want to be on top of the mountain, which is a very lonely place to be. Um, you know, I don't want to be there by myself,
True. 100%.
versus like, I just want to give everything away. You have to find that happy medium, that balance. And when you find that balance, that's when you start to step into your real purpose, right? And you can feel empowered, because you're kind of taking control
True.
of your own life, and you're creating an environment where it's like, it's just it's like a co-op, right? It's a back and
True.
forth, it's fluid, it flows. And that is when
100%.
you're happy, right? When you surround yourself with like-minded people, dude, that's when you live your best life.
And that's how one can understand their own personality, because everyone is a perfect mixture of five closest people around them.
Yes.
And one another thing which you said about individualism, that I want to be the best, that when you think that I want to be the best, there are two things. Now let me give you a context in terms of understanding. Is like, being the best is having the tallest building in the world.
Mm.
Let's assume that, like, I want to be the best, equal, I want to be the owner of the tallest building of the world.
Right.
Now there are two circumstances, that either you break every tall building and create your own 10-story building, or you create your own 250, 300-story building and say that, yes, I am the tallest, and let me help you to reach near me.
That's so true. Like yeah. Because we see people like that every day, right? Like there's an individual can only do so much. You can't splice yourself. Not yet anyways, and hopefully not anytime soon. That would be really messed up. But you have, like, if you are an owner of a company, as your company grows, a flourishing company will always have a connection with all its employees, like some sort of a human connection. You can't just see them as robots. They're humans, right? They're people, sentient people, individuals.
True.
So as your business grows, you have to have a connection. It grows and grows. Well, then you have to make sure that there's people, they're called supervisors, I think, that they take care of the people and they're making sure that they're okay. If you have happy employees, your business will continue to flourish. If you have a bunch of disgruntled employees, then you have union labor strikes. And, you know, we saw this in the 20th century, right?
Yeah. So one of my mentor, who is one of the India's one of India's biggest uh, executive coach, he said that if you want to be the owner, or if you want your company to be the biggest, employees are important. Now there are two ways you can
Yes.
treat your employees. Either one, you can treat them as your family, or else you can treat you can treat that you are accountable to each and every employee of your company.
Right.
Because even you, as you are the owner, but 90% of work has been done by your employee to be able to give you that 10% growth.
Right.
Now if you are not accountable to those
Yes.
employees who have done 90% of the work, you will never be able to get that 10% growth. So either you treat them as a family, or you be accountable to each and every one of them.
Could you be both? Could you do
These are
both?
two ways to treat your employees.
Mm-hmm.
Either to treat them as family, make a family culture
Yes. Yeah.
in your company, so that they can get emotionally engaged in their work.
Yes.
Not just they have to sit and do their work, they can emotionally get engaged with their work.
Yes. Yeah.
And second is, if I'm being accountable to my employees, it means that I have to make sure their financial stability as well, not only in terms of the salary I pay, but in terms of them having some percent of share of my company, so that I can tell
Right.
them that, hey, this
Right.
is not just my company, this is your
That's great.
company as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I'm accountable to your growth as well.
I think that that's the best when, you know, because being paid 9 to 5 just for your hours, that's not enough for people. There needs to be a sense of, like, the harder you work, the more you get out of this, right? There has to be, like, intrinsic rewards are only enough for things that you're passionate about. We also
True,
need
100%.
extrinsic rewards. We need that like I love doing this, but there does have to be, like, for my family, the more that I do this, you have to be able to show them something for it, right? Like, this isn't just
True.
my passion project. Like, I'm actually making something out of it. And business is just the same. If you're just paying
True,
employees
100%.
$18 an hour and that's it, that will never be enough. But when you're saying you're working towards your retirement and you can go and live on a beach in Thailand or wherever you want to go, people are like, yeah, I want to do that. And that gets them pumped up to be the best employee that they can be.
And also to make sure that they get those things,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
many
Not
people
just saying it.
hire
Yeah.
them
Yeah. Yeah.
just by showing them dreams that,
Yes.
I'll make you this, I'll make you that. And that's where you need to show that accountability at the time of hiring on paper, that hey, you are getting hired and you have this much percent of the company.
Yeah. Frame this because this is my promise to you. And that's
Yeah,
as an educator, the most important thing when you work with kids is that if you make a promise, you had better follow through with it. No, I'm serious. Because kids
100%.
remember that shit. And they remember it. Some of
True.
them can remember it their whole lives. I mean, maybe you remember an instance where
Yeah,
you had a parent or something. Yeah, we'll go to the zoo, I promise. And then they forget because they're a parent and they got a million other things to think of. And you're like,
true.
well, where's the lions and the leopards, man? So you're
True.
right. Again, there's that honesty piece. Honesty and persistence. It's funny because we were going to talk about entrepreneurship and self-help, but I think we covered that in this conversation just naturally.
True.
There was one
100%.
thing, a topic that I was like, yeah, let's talk about that. And self-help and history, because my undergrad
Mm.
was in history, yours is in physics. So what have you learned from history? What has helped you to understand yourself about learning history?
Learning history, when I was learning history at that time, I was not actually fascinated with it,
Mm,
because I was just learning to get marks. I was just learning to get good numbers. But during lockdown, when I was having these podcasts, I one of my mentor, Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai, he is expert in field of Chanakya, who lived in India thousands years ago.
mm.
And he was he was he was the he established one of India's biggest empire called Gupta Empire.
Mm. And
But
sorry, what was his name again?
uh,
Who established it?
Chanakya.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So when I brought him on the podcast, when we were having conversation around it, that time I got stuck in my head that hey, history is interesting. It is not that as boring as it used to be on books.
Yeah.
And then I sat and thought back that okay, this is history of my country. Now, and now there are history of many countries as well. There are different histories for each and every country. Every country has their own past. Every country has their own revolution. Every country
Mm,
has their own way of behaving in terms of citizens as well, because that's the only reason which helps in differentiating between a civil war and a civilized country, a country with a civil war and a civilized country.
right.
Because whatever you do, even if you are king of a country, even if you're a dictator of a country, you are accountable to each and every citizen.
Mm.
Just imagine,
Mm, mm-hmm.
I mean, okay, you are let's say you are king of um, 10 million people, or 100 million people. You have an army of 10 million. To what extent you can control the anger of 100 million people?
Hmm.
Just
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
If those 100 million people goes on with their bare hand, 10 million military
They'll be
also cannot
swarmed.
stop them.
They'll be
Yeah.
swarmed. Yeah.
And you call yourself a king, but still you are accountable to those 100 million people.
And we've seen that throughout history. I mean, the French Revolution, the
Yeah,
Haitian Revolution,
100%.
right? You look at Gandhi, right, and how he was able to overthrow the British rule there, essentially, and he didn't kill a single person,
Yeah.
right?
We went to non-violence.
Yeah, which is amazing that he was able to, you know, through mobilization of the people and the salt walks and stuff, he was
And just
able.
imagine that
Yeah.
time there were no smartphones.
There was no social media. So, and kind of that's where we're going. The future is because of social media, so many things are being captured. For example, you know, there's the farmers' protest in northern India, right? There's things that are going on in Nigeria. There's problems in Canada, like where I live. There's communities that are only 5 hours away, 7 hours away, and you can't drink the water there, right?
Yeah, true, 100%. And just imagine that now, as a podcast guest, I'm just thinking this, that imagine if we had this golden opportunity of recording a podcast with Gandhiji, with Martin Luther King,
Yeah.
with all those people. Just imagine the amount of wisdom we would have on our show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you talked about mentioning the elephant in the room and saying like, I'm very nervous. I would definitely be nervous interviewing any of those people because you know how much
Just
of a privilege
yeah,
that would have been, right? Or how that would be.
and just imagine the amount of wisdom they'll
Yeah.
put on our show. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we just know the outcome of their work.
Right. We don't
We
know the
don't
outcome
know
yet.
behind the stage. We don't know what happened behind their
Yeah.
brains. What instigated them that I'll follow this path. What instigated them that I'll do this. Because even before them, problem was there.
Yes.
It was not that the problem they born with a problem and they help us solve it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was there before their birth. Before Gandhiji's birth, Britishers were still ruling India.
Yes.
But because he found a solution, he was able to create a nationwide impact. And just imagine, we know that he followed non-violence.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what made him thought that non-violence will be an ultimate solution.
Right. Yeah. Because
Because
and he didn't
like
even
any
know.
one of us,
Yeah.
like any one of us, he would have thought that if 100 million people will take swords in their hand,
Mm-hmm.
Britishers will have to go. And that sounded practically right, even though he thought of non-violence.
And the other thing that the point that I like that you mentioned is we now know how that story unfolds and how it ended for Gandhi, you know, and how for some of them, obviously the work is still going on, of course, but we know that story, right? It's not like I was talking to you know, Malcolm X when he was 27, right? And not knowing
Correct.
where he would go by the time he was 35. So that's why this is so crazy, is because we're seeing people at this moment right now in their lives not knowing the potential and the perseverance that they will become and shape for themselves. For all I know, I could be talking
100%.
to the future president of India, or if you know I mean, because you're just getting started, you know, and I know you're not stopping. So last question for you, because I am looking at time. And by the way,
Yeah,
Jay, I got to have you on again because, you know, we've only just started
sure,
this. But
sure,
if you
sure.
could interview anybody from history, anybody, who would you interview? I know I'm just proposing to this right now, but
I mean, I've already said Gandhiji, but other than that, I would like to interview one of the most cruel person that has been, that is Adolf Hitler.
mm, yeah,
Because if I would have to break down his life, cruelty is the truth. There's no other side of it.
did you say duality
But
or cruelty?
cruelty, cruelty,
Okay,
the amount of people
cruelty.
he have
Yeah,
killed,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah.
And but he has that oratory impact. He had that impact that he was able to convince his people that what I say is correct.
Mm,
And that's what fascinates me, that okay, if you're a dictator, it's okay, but having impact on each and every person in your country that what I say is correct and making them believe is what fascinates me. And that too in in the time where there was no social media. Only way of communicating was newspapers.
Well, and he's like Hitler created our concept, our contemporary concept of evil. But I took a class on the Holocaust, and if you see that what happened there, it wasn't overnight. It wasn't like Kristallnacht,
Yeah.
like the night of long knives, and,
we
and
we we as story can think that it happened overnight,
exactly.
but
It was
just
gradual.
imagine if we would have brought him on podcast and we would say that what was your planning before becoming Germany's dictator.
Yeah. Well, the other
No
thing,
one knew what plan he had.
exactly. Well, but I don't even think he knew. Like, so here's the thing is, you look at some people, leaders in the world, and I won't name names, but you have to have a disconnect. If you're going to rule like an asshole and make
Hmm.
millions starve, knowing that this is happening, you have to be disconnected. There's just no other way. I can't kill a fucking ant. You know what I mean? Like, I look at an ant and I'm like, oh, poor guy, I'm going to put him outside. Because if I was an ant, I wouldn't want someone squishing me. But if you're a dictator and you're like, no, millions of people like that, like Stalin, like Mao Zedong,
Hmm.
and other leaders, historical leaders and contemporary, but there has to be a disconnect, and
True,
and and and
100%.
understanding that, right? But that's a good pick. That was a brave pick. I would have gone with something safe, like I don't know. Uh, now I'm on the spot. Joan of Arc. That would probably be a cool person to talk to.
Great. That
Now, Jay, I'm just looking at the time, and I have to go to another one. I want to thank you so much
Sure.
for being
Thank
on the
you for
show.
having me.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, yes, and this is just the start of us communicating.
Sure.
So, thank you
100%.
once again. Your show. Can
Thank
you
you.
tell us?
Yeah, my show, the Jay Thakkar Show, where the major niche is about entrepreneurship and self-help, where I bring leaders, one of India's top leaders, top coaches, to uh, help you guys to find a better career of yourself and to help yourself grow not only in terms of career but in terms of your whole life, in terms of your mental health, in terms of the way you perceive things.
Awesome, Jay. Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you so much. Thank you.